Hey everyone, Frank at Old Town Coleman. Welcome to my video on how to rebuild a double mantle lantern. Before I get started, let me cover a few things. First of all, you're going to have fuel a few inches away from fire. If you're not comfortable with this, I ask that you send your lantern back to Coleman for repair. It'll only cost you $55 and they'll return it in fully functional condition. That's a bargain. So if you're not comfortable doing this kind of work, please don't do it. I'm going to be rebuilding a Coleman 228E lantern today. Now, this instruction applies to most double mantle lanterns, starting with the 228B going all the way up to the J and K models. There are a few differences, and when I get to those differences, I'll cover them. So sit back and relax, grab a cup of coffee, and I'll be right back and we'll get busy tearing this 228E down. Okay, welcome back. First, the sequence that I'm going to be using, I try to kind of keep the same thing that I have on the website instructions, so that's the sequence I'll be using. It's not important that you follow them exactly. You can do it any way you like to. I'm going to be showing you how to do a complete rebuild. There are a couple parts that you may not want to mess with that I'll be showing you how to do. The first one is the valve stem packing. If you don't have a bad valve stem packing, you really don't need to pull it out. The second one is the check valve. It can be very difficult to pull that device out of a lantern. So if you don't need to, you may not want to do that. Make sure you have all the parts that you're going to use for your rebuild on hand before you get started. Things you're going to be needing, obviously, are a couple of new mantles. The check valve, if you decide to pull it, or if you have a bad one that's not working, this is a safety device, and we'll cover that more later, but make sure you have one available. A fuel filler cap. Always have a replacement fuel filler cap. I'll cover that in just a few seconds here, the safety of that. But make sure you have one of those, or a new gasket at least if you're going to rebuild your original. The valve stem packing, you don't have to replace that usually, but if you do, make sure you have one. For a lantern, I always recommend that you just take the time and a few dollars, 10 or 12 bucks, to replace the generator. You can rebuild a lantern generator, but it's pretty difficult, time consuming. It's easy to do a stove because they're so much bigger. A lantern is very small and it's harder to do. It's just easier to buy a new one. The tools and the cleaning solvents I'm going to be using today are usually what you'll just probably already have. The only extra tools that I'll be using today is this lantern clamp. I have a video on how to make that if you want to. An ingenious tool to remove the check valve. I'll show you how that works today too. And then there's a tool I've been using for about 20 years. One of my customers sent me his idea, and I still use it today, and that is how you protect the fount when you're taking the frame apart, how you keep it from chipping all the paint. Let's cover a few safety items. Make sure that you empty all the fuel out of your lantern before you get started. Usually when you buy an old lantern, it's going to have some of the old fuel in it. Just pour that into an approved container and take it down to a hazardous material recycling center. You can usually find those doing an internet search. Make sure you have a fire extinguisher within arm's reach all the time. If you're not familiar with how to do this, I recommend that you do the filling and fueling and lighting of your lantern outside. If you are familiar with how to do it inside, but do it in an area where it would be safe in case something happens. Always expect the unexpected. That way, if you turn around and you have a ball of flames on your workbench, you can deal with it a little easier if you expect something that isn't supposed to happen. And finally, let's talk about filler caps, because filler caps are a pretty big issue. Many filler caps look like this, and they have a hole in the side. Coleman used these filler caps on lanterns and stoves up until 1963. These are extremely dangerous. If you go to my website, you'll be able to read about the lawsuit where they got sued over a little girl getting burned over these. But what happens is, if your fount is full of pressure, the air and fuel being released as you unscrew this will come out this hole. And if that hole is pointing up towards the burner, it can go into a ball of flames. In 1963, they changed to what they call a Playman cap. It's the Playman invention. And all that is, as you can see inside here, there are 4 slots that they grooved into it. And so when this is released from the fount, all of the pressure will come back down and be directed away from the burner. This is a much safer cap, and in 1970 they made it a little bit safer. They removed this screw assembly, and it's now a one-piece, and in 1970 the cap started looking like that. And this is what they look like today. A new replacement cap will obviously not have red paint on it, but this is what they look like. Okay, and the last thing you want to do is take pictures of your lantern before you get started. First of all, if you have any questions when you're putting it back together, how it looked originally, you can refer back to your pictures. The second thing you can do is take a before and after picture and send them to me. I'd love to put them on the website. Okay, so let's get busy tearing this guy apart. First thing we're obviously going to do is remove the ball nut and the ventilator and the globe. So I have a lot of these soda boxes, and this is what I put all the parts in. So when I'm done, I'll just have a box full of lantern parts. And that keeps everything in one place for me, and I know I won't lose anything. So this lantern is in kind of average condition, I guess. I noticed earlier the pump stuck, and there was a lot of rust down in there, so I think we're going to have some rust issues when we get down into the fount area. But on this one, the first thing I'm going to want to do is I want to tear this entire burner off so I can remove the frame and the frame rest. First thing we're going to do is take a 7/16 inch wrench and remove the generator. Okay, I want to, once I get that loose, I want to lift the jam nut up a little bit, and I want to rotate my tip cleaner up. That will expose the eccentric block inside, and I'll be able to disengage. You can see the tip cleaner stem there, or the tip cleaner rod, I'm sorry, and I just pull that out, and I'm not going to reuse this generator right now, so just take the jam nut off and put that in your parts box. Okay, the next thing I'm going to want to do is I need to remove the tip cleaner. The tip cleaner has to come out because I'm going to be rotating this entire assembly, and if I do that, I'm going to bend that, and I don't want to do it. It's just soft brass. So I'm going to take it out. So I'm going to use a 3/8 inch. I have 2 fittings here. The one in the front holds the packing in. There is a packing inside of the tip cleaner. We don't want to pull that out, but we do want to pull the tip cleaner from the tip cleaner body. So I'm going to set that there, and sorry, but it's a little different doing this in front of a camera instead of just doing it, so everything's a little bit backwards to me right now. Okay, there we go. So now we got it loose, and I'm going to pull it out, and what it did, it disengaged from the eccentric block. So there's the tip cleaner stem, and there's the part that engages into the eccentric block. So I'm going to put that in my parts box. Now I'm going to take the lantern and turn it upside down because the eccentric block is loose in there. And that's your eccentric block. That rod sits in that little slot, and that's where your generator tip cleaner rod goes into. So put that down there. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we have to remove this. This is the air intake tube. We need to remove this tube from the tip cleaner. And you can see that there is a set screw right there. There's a set screw on the bottom, and then there's a set screw on top holding the burner head onto the air intake tube. We don't want to remove this one because we don't have to take this part apart. We can clean it without taking it apart, and it can be really difficult to do. But what we want to do is we want to take this apart. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this with some penetrating fluid and let it set about 10-15 minutes, because this is soft brass and you want these threads lubricated before you try to pull it off, because you can bend it pretty easy. So I'm going to squirt it with penetrating fluid and let it sit for about 10 minutes. Okay, so now you can see that that screw is it's sitting lower than the edge of the frame. It can really be a bear to get out. So if you have a long screwdriver, you usually can get a better angle on it. I've seen some people take a small bit, a screwdriver bit, and stick it down in there and turn it out that way. You can do that too. But I've always had success doing this. Just get it down there and put a little bit of pressure and turn it. There we go. You don't want to strip it out. This old guy was made in this lantern is from December of '59, and she spent some time outside. It's going to have a lot of rust on it. Okay. Now I'm going to use my lantern clamp. I'm going to clamp this guy down and get it a little more solid so I can start turning on things that are difficult to work on. You can try to do this with your hands, but oftentimes you can put a wrench, or I'm using some channel locks, and I'm just going to grab the head and I'm slowly trying to turn it. You do not want to bend the air intake tube that's brass, so be very careful doing this. Just, there it is. So you rock it back and forth, and once you got it loose, you can just unscrew it. That penetrating fluid, get down those threads and it should come right out. It's brass on brass down there, but sometimes you're just going to have some junk from it being used for so many years down there. So I'm unscrewing the air intake tube out of the tip cleaner body. This way I'll be able to get to the frame nut a little easier, and when I start turning the tip cleaner, it won't be turning the frame. That means it won't be turning the frame rest, and I won't be scratching the fount. So there's the burner assembly, the burner head, your two burner tubes and burner caps. You want to look at your burner caps and make sure your screens are good. If you have a bad screen, you need to replace that. But this is all the further we have to disassemble this piece. We can clean it up, blow it out, make sure there are no spiders or anything up in there, and it's out. The next thing is the frame nut. Now, the frame nut is a 9/16, and as soon as I find my 9/16, here we are. It's a 9/16 inch nut, and we don't have a lot of room down there to grab it. It can really be a bear. You can see it's just really hard to get to. In fact, if I was going to use this wrench, I would not be able to do it. You have to be able to find a wrench that will fit down in there. Now, if you have access to other Coleman lanterns and you happen to find a military lantern or a mil-spec, this is the wrench out of a mil-spec lantern. And that's what this was made for. So that's what I'm going to use today. And I'm just going to loosen that up. Sometimes you have to grind down a 9/16. It can really be a bear to get down in there to it. Maybe use some needle nose pliers, whatever you can do. All you have to do is back that nut off. And you can see that the frame has come loose. So now what I want to do is I want to protect my paint on the fount. So I'm going to use, a gentleman from Portland, Oregon devised this. All it is a old coffee can lid. I made this 20 years ago. And it's shaped where I can just slide it in and the lantern will sit on top of it. The frame rest will sit here. The fount will be under it. And as I work on this thing, it won't scratch the paint. So you can make this out of a whipped cream lid or whatever you have available. I don't even think they sell coffee in cans anymore. So I'll put it there. Now the next thing is the tip cleaner. There are a lot of ways to remove a tip cleaner. Some people sell tools to do this. I've always done it the same way. It works for me. If you look at the tip cleaner, you will see that it's a solid brass piece, but it has a hole in the back that can easily be bent. It has threads right here that can easily be stripped, and then it's got another hole right here that could easily be bent. You don't want to do any of that. So I take a 1/2-inch wrench down from the top and I just set it on there and get it snug down there best I can. Just like that. Now this thing is screwed into the valve. It is possible that when you go to turn this thing out, the entire thing is going to come apart. If it does that, don't worry about it. You can take it apart, you can put your valve in a vise and then unscrew your tip cleaner from it. But what we hopefully will happen is once we start turning this thing, it will disengage from the valve body and then we can take it apart normally. So what I'm going to do is, you'll see that the 1/2-inch box end wrench, the top of it sticks out the top of the frame. So all I'm going to do is take a screwdriver here for a little bit of leverage and stick it in there. And hopefully my lantern clamp is tight enough, it'll hold the lantern for me. And, nope, I got to tighten it up a little bit. Okay, and we're going to try it again. And you can see the whole valve's coming out. Not really the way I wanted it to happen, but that does happen sometimes. So it's still being protected. So the valve and the tip cleaner are coming out together. What we'll have to do is throw it into the bench vise to take them apart. If you don't have this piece in here, be very careful because you're going to scratch things because the frame rest is coming off with the tip cleaner. There it is. Okay. So now I can set this aside, get rid of this. So now I got a mess here. To clean this mess up, I'm going to take the valve's wheel off. Now I can stick the valve down in the vise, put my 1/2-inch wrench back on it. And now it will come apart. Okay, so sometimes that's going to happen, and I guess it's good that it did. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this all back together and then I'm going to show you how it normally would come apart. So let me put this back together. Okay, for the benefit of those that it comes apart the right way, I'll do it for you. This time the tip cleaner comes out without taking the valve out. So I just spin that a few times and then I can take it apart. And I can unscrew the tip cleaner. Now I just lift the frame off, set it aside. Frame, you can see it's got a little slot in the front. All you got to do is push it forward and lift it right off. And then I would take this off. So here is my bare fount. Now what I can do is, this is a good time to, if you can, I can't with this lantern because this is all messed up. This is very rusty. Something happened down there. We don't know yet what. But now would be a good time to test your check valve. If you have a good fuel filler cap and you have a pump that works, you can test your check valve. And what you would want to do is tighten this down. You don't have to have fuel in the lantern. Tighten down your filler cap, overpressurize it, give it 50 or 60 pumps, and then without turning the pump clockwise to close the air stem, all you would do is just rest your finger over it. If it comes out a little bit slow, like just that slow, you may not need to replace the check valve. However, if it comes out real fast like that, then you're leaking and you can either try to clean it or you have to replace it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, after doing that test, we can remove the valve. There are a few ways to do this. This is a 9/16" fitting, and you can put a socket over this. That way you don't bend things out of shape. You can put a socket and remove it right now, but the easiest way I've found is to put it upside down in your bench vise and turn the fount around the valve. And I've always done that, so I'll just do that right now. It's all made of brass, so be gentle with it. Don't want to clamp it down too much. But just set her down there, and then grab the fount and turn it around the valve. Okay. And out comes your valve. You can see it's green. That's the fuel and air tube. And it's green, which means it definitely needs to be cleaned. It smells horrible. There's a lot of varnish in this. So what I'm going to do is put my 3/8 inch on there and remove it. Now there is a metering rod and a spring inside of here. It's not spring loaded, so it won't come apart, but just so you know, that's what it looks like. So you can take these pieces and just set them aside. Next, we are going to take apart the valve stem, take it out of the valve housing. So this is the valve wheel. I took it off a few minutes ago. I want to take the direction disc out of there, and usually the direction disc from years of use will be stuck inside of the valve wheel, so you just tap it down on your workbench. Might take a couple times depending on how dirty it is, and it will come out. So what I want to do is put this on there and open it up all the way. Take a metal brush and just clean off this brass. That way it will be easier to take off. Okay, I'm going to take my 9/16 again, and I'm going to hold the valve closed while I do this. I don't want the valve turning while I'm taking off this nut, so just hold it like that so it doesn't move, and then back the nut off. Like that. Now it's free. Now, double mantle lanterns are a little different than single mantle lanterns. You can see I'm going to back it out a ways, and then it's going to stop. Okay, right now it is hit where the valve stem packing is tight inside of the valve body. What I need to do is break that free, so I'm going to grab it and I'm going to force it out. And you can see right there, you can see the valve stem packing coming out. So now, sometimes you have to put your valve wheel on it and put it back on tight so you can actually grab it. And it looks like I'm going to have to with this one. Okay, I need to pull it out. There it is. So here's your valve stem. And a double mantle lantern has two brass retainers on it. It's got one in the back and it's got one in the front. So we cleaned this area off and it comes right off. Now there's your valve stem packing, and it is usually attached to this front one. When we go put this lantern back together, it's going to be important that we put this piece on the right way, but that is your packing retainer, And I'm going to replace this one, so I would either tear it apart, or what I usually do is just take a pair of needle nose and break it in half to free it from that brass piece. Just like that. This valve stem packing definitely needed to be replaced. I don't know if you noticed it, but when I was unscrewing it, it was squeaking a little bit. So there's the retainer, and there's the front retainer, and there's the valve stem. And there's the valve. So put these in my parts box. Okay, what we're going to do next is take the pump out, and then we'll do the check valve. Okay, this lantern has a pump clip. Some lanterns have little small screws on the side, but this has a pump clip, and all you do to take this off, put a small screwdriver in there, right at the side of it, and give it a little bit of a twist, and she'll come right out. There's your pump clip. Now your pump cap, this piece right here, says oil on it, most of them. Notice that the oil hole is above the holes where the clip was. This thing usually gets full of oil and grease and years of dirt, and it gets really hard to remove from the fount. So the best way to do it is to get it all the way out and then just give it a good tug. If that doesn't work, what you can do is you just put your thumb on the side and take a small screwdriver and pry it off, pry all the edges off, and it will finally work its way free. You don't want to scratch your fount up, so use your finger and pull it right out. Oh boy, we got a bad one. So this is the pump. Oftentimes they don't look this bad and you can clean them up without taking them apart, but this one we are going to take apart. The leather pump cup seems to be in good condition still. It's pliable and it doesn't have any rips that I can see, but this guy has been sitting in there with some water or something. It's really rusty, so what we have to do is take it apart. It is a brass shaft and it has a nut on this end, so we are going to try. May have to put some penetrating fluid on this. Now, it's a wonderful thing about brass. It comes apart pretty easily. So now I'm taking the nut off the end. If you have a newer one, it's going to have a push-on nut, and a push-on nut is there's a groove around the end of the shaft, and the push-on nut has little sides that lock onto it, and you just have to pry it off with the screwdriver. But this one had a nut. And here's the pump cup. Again, there's no reason to replace this guy. It's in good condition after all these years. Now I'm going to take off the backing plate. That just provides support for the pump cup when you're pressing down. Take that off. Next is a spring. Still has a little bit of spring left to it. And the pump cap. And there's your pump shaft. So yeah, this is in pretty bad shape. We'll clean it up best we can, but it will still work. Okay, next thing is the check valve, and this is the hard part. Now, if you're only going to do one lantern, you probably don't want to expend the 40, 50 bucks it would take to buy the tool. If you're going to do more than one of these things, I recommend you buy it. If you're not going to do that, you can use a screwdriver. What I'm doing now is removing the air stem. The air stem fits into the check valve. This is your air stem, and if you can tell, it's got a little bit of green paint on the end. That means this air stem has been in this check valve since 1959. They put these in there before they painted the founts, so this is the original one. But that check valve has been sitting down there at the bottom for many, many years, and it is going to be difficult to get out. There are three ways you can pull this out. You can use a flat tip screwdriver, a large one, and what I did when I first started doing this 20 years ago is I took and I ground the end of the flat tip screwdriver off so it fit into that slot a lot better. So this is the check valve, and you can see it has a slot on there. The problem is this thing is made of brass, and it sticks down there, and if you put a ill-fitting blade on it, it's going to strip it out. So what I did 20 years ago is I took a large flat tip screwdriver and I ground the end off, and I made it where it would slide into that slot and hold it pretty tight. And then I would let it soak for a day or two with penetrating fluid, tap it a few times with a hammer with that screwdriver, and then back it out. And I usually had about a 60% success rate. And the ones I stripped, I realized I could use a number 2 or number 5, depending on what side check valve you have, a screw extractor. The problem with the screw extractor is it ruins the check valve. If you have a 220B or a 220C, you need to know that the check valve you can buy from Coleman now does not fit. You have to be very careful when pulling that one out. I recommend if you don't have a check valve remover that you don't pull it out, you clean it in place and use it. Those are special ones. You can buy them still, but they're pretty expensive. So the third way to get one of these out is to use this ingenious tool. It's called a check valve removal tool. And all it is a rod that I will thread down into the check valve. Same threads that the air stem go into. And once I get that down there, then I'm going to slide this down, and I'm going to put these will lock into that groove that I showed you. Like that. Okay, put the spacer back on it. And still locking that. And this tool's it costs about $50 to get it into your hands. Take my 5/8 inch wrench, and that's all it takes. I didn't put any penetrating fluid on it or anything. And out she comes. So this check valve's been in there since 1959, and there it is. Didn't damage it. I can still use it. This one's pretty good shape. I can use it later if I'd like to. I will replace it. And there's the original check valve and the original air stem. Pretty good shape. So put those in my parts box. Okay, now we're down to the filler cap. I've not removed this filler cap, and it looks like it's going to be a bear to get off. These things also rust to the fountain, it did. So cases like this, what you want to do, and I'm going to put it back in the clamp so I can torque on it a little bit. What I'm going to do is, if it's a mint condition fount, you obviously would want to take a little more precaution than this. You can wrap a rag around it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these channel locks and open them up a little bit and be very gentle. I'm going to be very gentle and make sure that I don't put the jaws into this area back here. I did not do that scratch. I have not touched this yet, so keep in mind I did not put that scratch in there. But if you don't use caution, you will scratch the heck out of it. But what I want to do is just grab it and put a little bit of pressure and try to turn this thing. There we go. Now, hopefully it will come off. I may have to do it again, and I do. She's had some water in her. Okay, so there's our filler cap. Now I'll show you how to take it apart. To take this 3-piece cap apart, you put it back on and you get it as tight as you can with your fingers. And you put a good fitting screwdriver in there, and you apply good downward pressure. Make sure it's square so you don't strip it. And when it releases, it's going to pop. If it feels like it's just slipping, that means it's not tight enough on the fount. So, actually this one looks like it's been pulled off recently, so that was kind of easy to do. No, I can't do this again. Okay. So there is that, and there's the insert. That's where the gasket goes. And you can see that gasket's in really bad condition. It's worthless. But there's your 3-piece filler cap from 1959, and I will rebuild that. And I don't recommend using these kind again because it has the hole in the side, and that is very, very dangerous. If you have a 242 single mantle lantern or 243, something like that, or a 500 stove, they have a smaller filler cap and they don't make replacements for it. So then in those cases you would have to use the original with a rebuilt insert in it, and you have to be really, really careful with this kind of cap. But that's it. So we'll put these away, and now I have a complete double mantle lantern in a box that is ready to be cleaned and put back together, which we'll do in the next video. So thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest. And the instructions that I'm showing you today can be found at oldtowncoleman.com. And until part 2, keep them burning. Good timing, huh?